Someone in the comments had suggested, why don't you do Gaoranger versus Wild Force? And I had thought, it's kind of interesting because Wild Force and Gaoranger are virtually one-to-one identical with very few changes here and there. I never care for that type of adaptation because Power Rangers is it's supposed to be its own thing. And then on top of it, when you try to adapt something from Super Sentai, there's a lot of Japanese elements that just don't make any sense that can be brought into an American show. Which ones will I like more? Cole and Red, aka Kakeru. These two characters are one of the few that are vastly different from each other. Cole's character was a mystery. He didn't know where he came from. He was growing up in the forest. When he was brought in to be Wild Force Red Ranger, he was awkward, weird, but he still had that nobility of him because he was brought up by, nature and animals and lived in the forest. He understood to protect Earth, everything on the planet, give everything equal respect. So he was worthy of becoming a Power Ranger, but also the Red Ranger. In Gaoranger's case, Kakeru is similar. He wanted to become a veterinarian. He loved animals. He loved all those aspects. But the similarities between Cole and Kakeru end there. Cole's backstory revolves around Master Org. Now, Master Org did not exist in Gaoranger. He was one of the few original characters. Master Org was created by the hatred that Victor Adler had to his friend, who ended up becoming Cole's parents, turning into him and killing them. The very few times Power Ranger does kind of a horror type of story, and it's kind of surprising because we always criticize Wild Force for a lot of dumb things. It's always cheery, the whole friendship, never give up. But then all of a sudden from left field, they're like, no, let's put in this murder and revenge and hatred type of story for Cole's background. And you're like, wait, what? Kakeru, he kind of didn't really have anything past the whole, Roki arc. He did help the Sixth Ranger break free of the curse. After that, he was kind of your bland Red Ranger. He was like Jason in MMPR. He was an okay leader, helped people out, but then that's really all he did. And I think that's what motivated, the Wild Force writers to come up with this original story, which is why I always say adaptations for Power Rangers should never copy the Super Sentai, because if they just one-to-one copied Super Sentai, we would have had Cole act like Kakeru, and we would not have had the story that he went through, that torment, that hatred. It wasn't a happy ending, but at least he had closure of figuring out what happened to them. So this one goes to Cole. Now, these characters are virtually one-to-one identical with very few variations. They're Air Force pilots. They kind of ran away from that background to become Power Rangers, and they still have the same type of journeys. She meets two, twin kids, and they become the Wild Force Zords. Taylor has the exact same rivalry with Jindrax. I think Taylor was a little bit more interesting because one of the things that Taylor did better than Gaku was that she had a presence on Wild Force. Even though Cole's the leader, and you like him because he's kind of like weird, big kid in that sense, Taylor's kind of trying to be the mom. Also, another issue that Taylor had at the beginning was that she didn't like any of the other Rangers. She was always, pompous and up herself. Taylor went through that process, and over time you could see her more or less strict. Yeah, she still has her things, and she still wants to follow her rules. Danny really didn't like her because, he was the weakest one. He was the one who was awkward. He didn't know how to fight properly. And obviously Taylor, being from the military, was trying to treat him like an officer. You have to learn these things. You have to follow orders. And I'm like, Danny's a civilian, so it's like the wrong way to teach him, which is why Cole worked better in that sense. Taylor, like I said, worked better as she got more warmer, more like, okay, these guys are not military. I shouldn't be treating them like dirt, and then eventually understood why Cole was picked. On the other side, with Gaku, Yellow, instead of following that journey of being a strict idiot and then, becoming warmer to everyone else, they kind of turned him into, the jokester. Whenever he fought, Jindrax in Gaoranger, it would be kind of more of a laughing stock. While in Taylor's case, it was more of like that rivalry. He was the idiot, but Taylor did not become the idiot along with him. And he also kind of got lost. As the show progressed, we were following, the plot line of Roki, the Sixth Ranger, the main plot around them. This one goes to Taylor. Now, the youngest of the group and the ones that are more like eager to be superheroes, but then screw up because they're never thinking of like the repercussions. Like, oh yeah, I can prove myself. I'm actually good. I can fight just as well as Taylor and that, which is what gets him in trouble because he runs into situations and never looks. I think the differences between the two sides, Kai, I think, got more focused. And I think it's because Gaoranger and Super Sentai in general, they allow for more goofy aspects of the shows. While Power Rangers, yeah, we had Turbo and that didn't work out well. That's as the extent as we go as like funny seasons. And whenever Sentai goes beyond that, Power Rangers tends to like, that's it. We're going to hit the brakes. We can't go that far. Max didn't really get much to do beyond the whole never give up. Danny ended up being his plot device and not really a character at that point. Kai, I think, handled that much more better. And the episodes that featured Kai were done better in Gaoranger. Even though Wild Force copied so many things and episodes and plot lines, the episodes that featured Kai, they were altered to a degree, especially the giraffe episode. That was changed the most. That's what hurt Max. He just became the never give up guy. Because of those few differences in the way they told his episodes, Kai beats out Max, definitely. Now, Danny and Sotaro, they share the exact same process. Their timid nature, they don't know how to do this job. Why was I picked? That lack of confidence. And of course, even having that girlfriend for that short time. But Danny was handled worse. Yeah, he followed the same things. Never give up episode, the friendship with Max. But it's like they didn't know what to do with him, which was strange too, because, Shotaro also had the same problem where he has to learn to, build up his confidence, like what Billy went through. But then Danny just like disappears. Once the whole girlfriend thing gets finished and over with, Danny kind of just falls apart and disappears behind the scenes. And the only time Danny is ever used is to boost Max. He kind of just becomes a plot point for Max's development. While Sotaro does do those same things, he doesn't get lost. He does have some funny moments and focus episodes. And they don't just completely drop the whole girlfriend aspect. We do go back to it, and there are additional episodes where Sotaro and Kai argue and complain. So this one's gonna go to Sotaro. They are 100% identical. The father, the whole martial arts training. The only real difference from Sae is that Alyssa wanted to become a teacher, and at the end of the season, we see her become that teacher. Alyssa has a final goal. While Sae, I thought she was interesting, and I did like her whole father dynamic, and he wanted her to follow his teachings to lead that school eventually. But she became this Gaoranger, and she obviously couldn't tell him, so he didn't know what was going on. So he kind of thought she doesn't care about the family tradition and whatnot. Unfortunately, Sae kind of just disappeared. Worse so than Danny. Once they got through that whole father episode, Sae, I can't really remember any major focus episode. I like Alyssa. She does care for the entire team. And Sae, I liked her journey with her father more. Both have heavy flaws, but both also have those key good moments. But I think I'm gonna ultimately go with Alyssa solely because she at least completed her journey, while Sae ends up back into the school, but it just feels like a reset. She re-enrolls in the class, and the whole year of her being a Gaoranger doesn't count. The show ended as she just went on with her life, and we just kind of don't really see where she ends up. They have very similar plots. He was trapped by the Zenaku mask, and they had to fight their demons, and they even copy the whole, he doesn't want to, be in Animaria, and he ended up staying in this, billiards place. One thing that they did differently is that Sugimaro was very lone wolfish, more so than Merrick. Merrick does warm up with everyone, and I know Suki also does warm up too, but Merrick talked much more easier to Princess Shayla. And I think the one thing that they also did better, I really like the actor who was working with him in those pool scenes. It was kind of sucked that he was only restricted to that part. It would have been kind of interesting if he found out the truth of who Merrick was and wanted to help out the Wild Force Rangers in some degree. Oh, what if he finds out he's a Power Ranger? How does he react to it? And so both characters are very similar, nearly identical in every which way, but I think Merrick ultimately felt more interesting because he was more open to the entire team. I think Gao Silver and Red, they worked together, but they didn't really feel like friends. They were more as colleagues. While Merrick and Cole, they had similar issues. He was trapped in this mask and tormented for thousands of years, lost his life, and he was nearly killed. While Cole, same thing. He didn't know who he really was, what happened to his parents. So, pretty bad, horrific things happened between the two of them. And they kind of bond in that regard. Kind of like how Jason and Tommy work so much more better than Burai and Geki due to the story elements. So, because of this, Merrick beats out Sugimaro. It's strange when you start thinking about the Wild Force characters. They're very much virtually identical to Gaorangers, and you would think, oh, well, there's no real difference. But when you actually start looking at the characters, the Wild Force characters work just slightly better overall, because I think ultimately what happened in Gaoranger's case, I don't have a problem with any of the characters, even Tentomu's weirdness. Princess Shayla she acts more like she's on drugs. She's way too high and energetic, oh, the Power Rangers, how good, and it just does not work. And then when you look at the characters in general, I think they just fit together more. Yeah, Cole can be annoying, but he started to understand things, and it's oh, you know what? Yeah, I understand it. You're not supposed to act like this, and I should listen to Taylor because both sides have good arguments. When push comes to shove, you have to make a decision on tough subjects. So you see that evolution between all the characters, and I think they are overall handled better as a group versus the Gaorangers. They just fall apart as a group. And I'm grateful that the writers from Wild Force actually kind of caught these issues with the characters, because we already had a boring season as it was. And even if I never saw Gaoranger, I didn't like the season in general because I saw Wild Force many, many years before I saw Gaoranger. You have to admit, it was also hampered by Time Force, because Time Force was such a good season with overall great characters, great story, great drama. And then you get into Wild Force and you're like, oh, it didn't reach the same levels. And I think, Wild Force is unfairly hated for those key reasons. I'm not going to say Wild Force is a good season just because of that. When you look back at it, I think it really does not deserve a lot of the hate that it did when it first came out. And for us at the time, it was a severe downgrade, even though there are many seasons later on that are far more worse and far more stupid than what Wild Force has done. So I think time has let up on the grievances of this season, and this is another prime example of Super Sentai faltering with their season as well. If you have a suggestion, topic, characters you'd like me to cover, leave a comment down below and I may use it in next week's video.